So what we're going to talk about today is a incident that happened in 1954. So what I want you to do is think back. You probably haven't heard of this. People who've seen me do this talk, you've heard of what the Bellingham windshield hitting incident was. But I want you to kind of, if you do know of it, I want you to kind of forget about it for the moment and think about it as you're waking up one morning to read the newspaper. And this is where we're getting most of our information in 1954 is from maybe a TV station, the radio, your neighbors, your friends, and the newspapers. So what I'm going to show you today are a bunch of screenshots that I took from newspapers.com. So do not try to read the screenshots. It's not going to make any sense. They're blurry and who knows what. Just think of it as a guide, as the story I'm telling you. So you wake up March 24th, 1954. You open up your Bellingham Herald, as you do every day, and you see these headlines that there has been some damage to windshields from BB guns, which were those guns that we shoot little tiny projectiles out of, apparently. And you think to yourself, okay, what's that all about? And the headlines are talking about that there's damage done to the windshields of these cars, and there's hoodlums out there running rampant in the street, young men apparently, that are shooting at people's windshields. And you think, oh man, I mean, what do you think? You're not really sure, but it's 1954, and who knows? People are doing this kind of thing, so you're just taking it in. And then you start reading a little bit more about it. And again, don't sit here and try to read this print. It's a newspaper. It's kind of hard to read. So you're starting to see that 125 cars were struck by a BB shot or a pellet from air guns from around the shipyards in a plywood firm. And so you're wondering about that. Wow, somebody's been out there shooting at people's windshields. That's really unusual. I mean, don't they have enough to do with themselves and these, get a job or whatever? So then the investigators, police are called, and they come out and they start looking around the outside of the car, and they find this kind of rusted shot around the cars, in the gravel around, and they're wondering what's going on. And they said, well, maybe there's also slingshots are being used. And so they're trying to figure out what's going on, and they really just don't have a lot of information. So they have all these officers, I guess, who have nothing better to do, but people are shooting at cars. They might start shooting at us. This is dangerous and scary. Should I walk outside? Should I mow my lawn? Should I go out and garden? If people are outside shooting, who in the heck is doing that? Suspicious characters, probably. So then they start seeing people around that look suspicious, and they say to themselves, that might be the person there who's shooting. They look like they have a gun. They look like they have an air pistol. They look like they have a slingshot, those young hoodlums again. So then police start talking about it, saying, well, I don't think it's youngsters. I think it's people who are a little bit older, and we're going to hold them responsible. We're going to find these people who are doing this damage to cars, and how dare they, and let's go get these people. So I'm thinking to myself, if you were reading this report in 1954 and you woke up to it, what are the kinds of things you're thinking to yourself? What are you going to do? What would you naturally want to go do if you thought that somebody was out shooting up the windows of your car? Check your windshield, right? How often do you check your windshield of your car? Yep. Right. So when you're sitting in the car and you're looking out of the windshield into the street, you're not necessarily looking at your windshield. You're not really paying attention. But if you get out of your car and you go look at your windshield, and I think that maybe we should all try that ourselves, go and look at our windshields. And if you run your hand over the windshield, you're probably going to notice there are pits in it. Especially in 1954, maybe technology wasn't quite as good as it is now. There would probably be quite a bit of pitting on your windshield because, that seems natural. but you hadn't noticed it before. So once the media bring it to your attention, and your neighbors and your friends and people in the parking lot and the places where you work, they're going to say, hey, did you check your windshield and look and see if there's any pitting on it? And you see it and you go, wow, I've got pitting, and so does everybody else. And that car has it, and that car has it, and that car has it. There must be some people standing outside shooting at the windshields of all these cars. And why? I don't know. But that's what you would think. So that's what ends up happening. So the newspapers keep pulling this up, and this is another headline. And here's a very concerned group of people who are out pointing to a hole in the windshield, and they look very concerned. Except that one guy in the middle kind of has a smile, and they're pointing at this windshield with a hole in it, and they think somebody's been shooting at my windshield. And so vandals, just these awful vandals out there. So then they're trying to find these people. So I guess it's, again, there's not enough going on, and they want to find out what's going on. So they try to get the police get out there and do a hunt. So now they're very concerned. People are really upset. So they've got all these people who are trying to look for these vandals that are out there with BB guns, slingshots, pistols, who knows what, ice picks, I don't know. And then here's another picture, a little more close up of them, very concerned about the windshield. So then we start seeing reports. By midday, the number of vehicles struck by the BB shot has toppled 300 people. Now that's a pretty busy vandals. And how are they doing it? And it's so invisible. Nobody seems to notice that they're out vandalizing cars. You would think somebody would notice. Are they in the bushes? Are they behind cars? What's going on? And what is the purpose of this? So nobody really knows. And then it hits a school. So here's 50 cars all parked around the high school, and they're peppered with shot or something just before the school started. So the newspapers got all these details in here, and people are reading this and they're getting very concerned. And then they had irate students in the auto shop, some of whose vehicles were victimized to join in the search. Some 10 boys in each physical education class were also dismissed to aid. So you can see these young men out there with their weapons or something on the prowl, looking for people who are harming their cars, and they're pitting the windshields. And it must have been very scary. And you wonder, if they had found somebody, what would have happened to them as they were out running around looking for the hoodlums boldly entered the school grounds at the rear. So the details of the news reports, because the media wants to print what's going on, and the details getting really detailed again, so they're saying, here's how they entered the school grounds. Here's the teachers' cars were even hit. Students' cars were hit. And then it's Sears and Roebuck. And then they give the details. 35 or 40 more vehicles had their windshields chipped and broken. Now they're broken. And so personnel came out, and they were looking, and they said, oh, well, I didn't get hit because I came in later. So that we figured the time must be at 9:15 to 9:30. Did anybody see any of those hoodlums out there? And then here's more windshields. And it's reported at Lawson Mill and a car lot. And then people noticed a blue 1936 Ford coach leaving the scene. Oh my goodness, that's dangerous. More damage. The damage extended against, now it's leaving the city. So it's moving now. Bellingham is in Seattle area. It's like a suburb of Seattle. So now it's starting to spread. And other places, as they become aware of this problem, are starting to see windshield pitting in their neighborhoods and in their areas. And it's spreading to people talking about it at their workplaces, and on and on. And so sheriffs are getting really worried, because we don't know if people are wandering around with these guns or slingshots or something. Now the police are shaking down, I love that phrase, that's pretty scary, suspicious cars. License numbers, descriptions are being, people are calling in. They're all very worried about these windshield people. Here's suspects picked up, and then they were released after they were questioned, when they showed they weren't involved. But it's pretty scary to be picked up by the police. It's pretty scary to be shaken down. Somebody could become the person that they're after, and it's frightening. You may be in a place you shouldn't be, and now you have to, you might have been skipping out of school or had played hooky at work, or you're visiting somebody you shouldn't be visiting probably when their spouse is off to work, and you're in places you just shouldn't be. So now more people keep calling in as the reports get bigger, and it's reported on the newspapers, and it's reported by your neighbors, and it's reported by other media. You start seeing it spread, and that's what's going on. Here's another suspicious car, and they checked him out, and they finally realized he was just wandering around at car lots looking for a trailer. Here's another a few days later. This is another city. It is the headline in the newspaper. Windshield pitting continues, and it spreads to this other area. Hundreds of car windshields have been peppered by vandals in an outbreak similar to what had happened in another place 3 weeks ago. So we can see 3 weeks later, it is still going on. Now, I mean, it's not making a lot of sense. Are people wandering the streets with BB guns and slingshots and aiming at car windshields? I mean, what would be the point of that? And still, people are calling in as they find pitted windshields. I don't know if we're seeing a lot of skepticism, but I would think that hopefully people would start saying, but why? What's the point? How do we know? Okay, what's actually going on here? But as people might be talking about it with their neighbors and so on, other people, it's escalating and more people are involved. Hundreds of cars are now stopped. So what they're doing is they're going through the cars, they're checking license numbers, they're calling the police, they're like rifling through cars. Here's a bunch of tennis players just going to a tournament, and were stopped 3 times and searched by officers. That's pretty scary. Now 600 have had problems. 600 cars more. Now they're saying they're operating on foot and on the sidewalks. And you think, here's these residents, they're just terrified looking out the windows, and people could be walking by. Do they have a stick? Could it be a gun? Could it be a slingshot? Oh my gosh, I'm surprised nobody's getting hurt. So then here's more attacks. People are coming to work and they're getting checked. Now here's 750 missiles struck by the missiles. So the word is escalating. They're using the word missiles instead of, other things. Here's now they're going to rural areas. So people are going out into their farmlands and they're seeing their windshields are pitted. So is there strangers wandering down into dark roads and pitting windshields of cars that are in, the Farmer Joe or whatever, and his old farm vehicles? Everything's getting pitted. Now, what the heck is going on? So then they bring in more police officers and more police officers, and now the sheriffs, and then they have the men on duty in an effort to stem these attacks. The Seattle mayor is now all stirred up by the wind chills. So here's more. So they've got the mayor involved, and the mayor is like being forced, I have to do something about this because my constituents are all upset about their wind chills. 1 million people are now stirred up by the case of the pockmarked wind chills. Some are blaming H-bombs. Remember, this is 1954. There's a lot of scare going on about, H-bombs, or who knows what's going on out there. They're very scared. The government's probably covering it up, Then the mayor asked the president of the United States to instruct appropriate federal agencies to cooperate with local authorities on an emergency basis. It could be atomic. I mean, this is really spreading. It's really scary. Some skepticism. So some people are sneaking in with their little skepticism out there. They think there's a lot of people are victims of mass hysteria, suddenly conscious of something that may have happened days, weeks, or months ago. Tommy rot, he says. Tommy rot. There isn't anything I know of that could be causing unusual breaks in windshields. They've examined several cars. These people must be dreaming. So should we listen to the chemistry department of University of Washington to assist authorities trying to figure out the riddle? No, let's put them on like the low part of the newspapers. So now one thing is certain. The claims of damaged windshields are mounting into the thousands, and one thing else seems to be certain. No other glass objects seem to be suffering, not even the side windows of the cars. That's suspicious. You would think if somebody's aiming at the cars, they'd be aiming at windows in general, not only windshields. It's odd. So then here's motorists are very upset. This is weeks later because now air is being let out of the tires of the car. Not all the air, just some of the air is being let out of the tires of the car. So they're going out looking for more vandals. People are sneaking up to their cars in the middle of the night and letting out a little bit of air out of their tires. Not all the air, just a little bit. But boy, those vandals, they've gotten tired of pitting our windshield, so they're starting with that. Here's the Seattle mayor, who's still all stirred up. So he says, we should probably calm down now because it looks like it's past. We still don't know what's going on, but it looks like they've gotten over it, whatever the mission was they were doing. So finally, police laboratory says that they had done a check. They started spending a lot of time looking at it, and it looks like it is mostly hysteria is going on. 5% vandalism and mostly has public hysteria. So somebody, it takes some time. This is weeks later. It takes some time before people can start reasonably responding to whatever the crisis is. But in the moment, it's all just feeding off of next story, next story. Oh my gosh, let's get some more details. The reporters, the newspapers have to report something because everybody's talking about this. So some people claim the damage has happened before their eyes, which is fascinating. So here we go. We're spreading a little bit further. The mystery seems to be that they're starting to get a little more criticism. They're saying it looks like it's starting to become hysteria. They had this naval station somewhere in that area. They locked it down, and any car that was coming in or going out had to be searched. And then they still couldn't figure out what was going on. So some areas are starting to have some skepticism, and others are still experiencing hysteria. So then they're starting again talking about radioactivity. Now this is getting even more frightening. They're using Geiger counters. They're testing the wind chills. They're very worried about it. So here he went to Eisenhower. This is again another story. People went outside and they're protecting the wind chills with newspapers and shopping bags. Another use of shopping bags. Hey, buy more newspapers. You can put them on your windshield. It'll protect your pitting, I guess. I don't know how you're going to drive, but you know, whatever. So, and then this little clip is talking about that. One of the reasons that this is spreading is because the newspapers keep reporting it and they keep hyping it. And so it's getting there's a huge circulation of this newspaper, and most people are getting their information from the news. So it is the newspapers are printing it because it's selling, but they're printing it because people are talking about it. So it's like the cycle that it's continuing. So, flying saucers may have been involved at some point. So, of course, flying saucers has got to get there somehow. So, possibly flying saucers have been the response. I don't know why a flying saucer would be pelting windshields of cars, but okay, only the windshield. So then they figured out that the particles they're finding on the ground are actually of meteors origin, meteor, whatever. All right, so then it goes on to imagination. So now you've got people pitting neighbors against other neighbors, and people at work are upset. Coworkers are upset. Like, no, I know what I saw. It happened in front of my eyes. It's a government conspiracy. It's a cover up. And they're like, no, dude, it's okay. It's fine. You know, wind chills get pitted. That's normal. No, it's not. And so everybody's kind of dividing into these tribes, and people are getting upset. So things are still on edge in some areas, and some are kind of starting to get a little more skepticism. So here comes a glass company that designs windshields, and they said that this is just ordinary. But this story is coming out much later, weeks later, and they said this is just normal wear and tear on a windshield. I don't know what you guys are talking about, but still, the hysteria in some places is overwhelmed, right? So now that the story has been picked up by other areas, it's spreading around the world. Here it is in Guam. So suddenly people in Guam are reporting that their windshields are being pitted. They go outside, they look, heck, there is pits on their windshield. So the hoodlums are in their area now. So, okay, so this is Wikipedia page. And for those of you who may or may not know, I run a Wikipedia editing team. What we do is we spend a lot of time working on Wikipedia pages concerning science, scientific skepticism, claims of the paranormal. We did not write this Wikipedia article, but it is there for you guys if you want to have more information about the windshield pitting epidemic. So now this is the point where we need to talk about what actually happened. Some people were so, and the H bombs, and it happened before their eyes, and UFOs are doing things, leaving, I don't know what they thought, but they also thought that some of the patterns on the windshield were kind of not defined hits. They thought it was sandworm eggs. And so the sandworms had gotten into the windshield, the little holes, and they'd gone in there and laid eggs. And then the eggs would become little sandworms, and they were spreading, and they were making the actual veins on the windshield spread. I mean, so the stories got really ridiculous and far-fetched, and they just kept spreading because that's how people were doing this. But what is actually going on is this type of mass panic, and it's fueled by, again, the media. The media is trying to get clicks. Well, in that time, it was trying to sell newspapers. And by doing this, what it was doing is it was fueling the panic, even though they thought they were informing the public. And it takes a long time for the skepticism or for the explanations to come forward, because people have to do their research, they have to figure it out. Let's look into it. What are these little items we're finding on the ground around the windshields? Let's find out what is actually happening. And it takes time. And then when the solution is discovered, it doesn't make the front page headlines. It's like page 4 or 5. And only if you're paying attention do you realize. And it's actually spread all over. There's reports of this hitting Germany and all over the nation. I don't know if anybody remembers that, if you were able to read newspapers in 1954, if you remember this or not. But apparently it was a terrifying time for about a month in the Seattle area and then spreading to the rest of the world. What we're seeing right now is we're seeing this kind of thing happens many times. And the reason why I'm telling you this story is because we need to approach sensationalism and slow down and use some critical thinking a little bit here before we start buying into the hype of things. And recently, you guys might have been aware that there was another panic happening, started in New Jersey, with drones. Anybody heard about the drones? And lots of hands going up here. So there was a lot of scare with these drones that are going on. And because we have more areas than just the media, I mean, the newspapers, now we have the internet, we have, podcasts, YouTube, lots of ways, social media, Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, Twitter, all those places. You're getting a lot of information about what's going on with these drones, and you don't even know how to find good information because everything is just coming at you so fast. A lot of it's eyewitness testimony. You're seeing videos taken out of context. You're seeing, just little snippets of lights in the sky. You don't know what that is. Somebody says it's a drone. I don't know. And then you have a newspaper reporter who's trying to do a story on it, and that they're out there doing their, best that they could do. And they have somebody they think is an expert pointing at lights in the sky saying, I don't know what that is either. By the time they investigate it and finally decide what it is, it's too late. They've already spread the story. And then you have people putting their drones up in the sky to look for the other drones. Now we have more drones. You have drones everywhere. And actually what it turned out to be is mostly airplanes. So now that time has passed, we kind of know what it was. It was airplanes, people misidentifying, people having hysteria. I have really good friends that are, very critical thinking minded, and they're starting to see, they said that they saw stuff happening in their area. And other people are saying to them, but that doesn't make any sense. Why would a UFO, because of course that's what they think they are. They think they're something from another planet. Why would they be coming to New Jersey of all places? And why would they be looking in your backyard? Who cares? What's going on in your backyard? Why don't they use Google Earth? Why would they be coming? And they're not asking those questions to themselves. All they're doing is they're buying into the hysteria that's going on at the moment. And we've seen this happen many times. And usually it looks like that the hysteria happens the most when we're at times of crisis and things are happening in the world where either we're distracted by other things, and this is the way we're using to I don't know, calm ourselves. I don't know why, but by gauging in a new terrifying thing that's happening, so that we don't have to look at the other terrifying thing that's happening that's actually probably more important, but you don't have control over it. Here, at least in some of these areas, you can go and put newspaper on your car windshield, I guess, so you feel like you have some sort of way of fixing the problem. But we need to be slower about jumping to conclusions. I mean, if you think about these things, it really doesn't make a lot of sense. But throughout time, we've seen these mass hysterias with people. I don't know if you remember the mass gasser. That was probably in the 50s. Some woman saw back again during the time of where we were afraid of war. Well, we're always afraid of war, but things were going on in the news. Some woman smelled gas outside of her kitchen window or something, and so the story spread. It went to one person, to another person, to the media, and then you had people out thinking that there was a man who's coming up, a Russian man, by the way, who's a Russian. She didn't see anybody. She just smelled gas. And so they had this Russian man who was he was going around and he was gassing random housewives for reasons, nefarious reasons. And there was a panic. And I can't remember the name of the town, but you can actually Google that, the mad gasser of such and such. That was another hysteria that spread. And it's a fascinating psychological thing. And we've been doing these for years. And that's what's happening with this. And one of the, I put this slide up here for you because this is the article that that Skeptical Inquirer had on all different kinds of mass delusions and hysteria over time. So the windshield pitting incident is just a little paragraph or so in this. But if you're interested in this topic, then Robert Bartholomew, who you can see his name up there at the top, is one of the experts in this. And he has been talking about this idea of mass hysteria, which even goes to, have you guys heard of Havana syndrome? Yeah, oh, hands up on that. So the Havana syndrome has gotten very, very awful. And one of the things Robert Bartholomew's done, he's written books about this, lots of articles, is that what's going on in Havana is that it's a deeply stressful time. They're very mistrustful of the government that's happening in Cuba. So for those of you who don't know about Havana syndrome, supposedly, these diplomats working in Cuba have experienced side effects like headaches, backaches, neck aches, memory loss, things that are normal aging, parts of aging and things we have, aching in the body. And they also heard sounds. Now we know that what they heard were cicadas. And cicadas only come out every so often. So it was an unusual sound, but they recorded it and they said that's what it was. It was cicadas. But they believed they were targeted by microwave weapons in the embassy in Cuba. Oh, and not the people who were working staff, like the cleaning and the cooks and stuff, like they weren't targeted. Only the diplomats were targeted by these microwave weapons that were coming in. You know, so when you start thinking about it, you go, wait a minute, wait a second. So then what happens is the story spreads, and now it's diplomats all over the world are being targeted by this microwave. I don't know why it's a microwave, but it's some sort of targeted sound device or something that's harming these people. But it's only giving them symptoms that are common, normal symptoms of aging and under stress that these diplomats are in Cuba. This would be something that they would experience. It seems like that would be normal. But now the government has gotten involved. And you know that right now it's so difficult to know what's what. We're changing, presidents here and there, and from Democrat to Republican to Democrat, and so on. So nobody really trusts anybody, and they think everybody's covering up. So now there are agencies out there that are funding people who are experiencing Havana syndrome, even though there's no definitive test, and it doesn't make any sense that there would be this weapon. I mean, they've blamed Russia, they've blamed China, they blamed Iran. We're just blaming everybody. I don't know why the aliens haven't been blamed yet, but I'm sure they're next. Maybe sandworms, I don't know. But so now there's funding. So the government has started to fund these programs. And so people who are diplomats are saying, I'm experiencing neck pain, I have headaches, back pain, I can't remember where I put my keys. And so therefore, I'm entitled to time off to heal from the Havana syndrome microwave things. And I want my money for it because I've been harmed. And people and the governments are paying out. So if they're paying out, then there must be something there, right? It goes back to these, you see these Roundup, the Roundup, the glyphosate, the stuff that you spray on that gets rid of weeds, and like baby powder, Johnson and Johnson baby powder. Have you seen these class action suits against them? People are saying, I've been harmed by this product. I've been harmed by this. This has made me have hair loss. My hair is falling out. It's like, well, yeah, your hair falls. That's normal. Or I'm not sleeping well at night or whatever. So it must be the baby powder, or it must be the Zantac, or it must be the Roundup. And when they do the tests, you can't convince people because by this time it's starting, the insurance companies are paying out money. And so it's easier to just pay people off so they go away and settle it than to go through court cases. You're going to get a jury, and the jury is going to sympathize with it's a good chance the jury is going to sympathize with the people who are experiencing problems. And that continues. And then the media picks up on these stories, and it's just a constant problem. So I think that's my last slide. I think I'm ready for any questions you have. And I'm happy to answer questions on lots of topics. If you know who I am, I run the Monterey County Skeptics down in Salinas area, Monterey County. I also am, I guess, considered an expert on psychic mediums, and I run multiple stings on them. And I also run a very powerful Wikipedia project where I train people to edit Wikipedia. So I can handle lots of questions. I could probably even talk about things I know nothing about, and I could probably pretend with confidence that I do. So take it for a grain of salt. I may not know what I'm talking about, but I'm happy to make something up. Oh, me, yeah.
I've noticed not so much conspiracies. I've noticed it's not so much a conspiracy thing, but a lot of times I'll read a scientific article that strikes me as really fascinating. But if I don't hear anything else about the same phenomenon in a couple of weeks or a month, I'm disappointed. It's there. I'd like to have it confirmed, and I've never seen retractions of those sort of things, or I don't know how to address perfect. Falling apart. There's a, yeah.
Okay, so I have an answer for that. Now, a lot of people poo-poo Wikipedia, but I want you to understand that Wikipedia has a lot of strict rules. So one of the best place to get your information is from Wikipedia, if you know what you're looking for. So has anybody seen these stories that are coming out that they've solved Jack the Ripper? That's like in the last
They
week.
do that periodically, I think.
Yeah. And they find Amelia Earhart every few months. But the Jack the Ripper story is out right now. And that is, they said that they've solved it with using DNA. So what I do when I get to find these stories like this is I go to Wikipedia and look and see what's on the Wikipedia article, because they have to use notable citations. And if you look at the talk page, which is on a Wikipedia page, on the left-hand side, there's a little tab called talk. You can see the editors discussing what is coming up. And if there is any kind of contention about whatever is in the news, they're discussing it. And they're saying to each other, yeah, I see this is happening, but let's wait for better sources. All we have right now are like the lower quality citations. Let's wait till we get some better, good quality stuff. And if you look at the Wikipedia page for Jack the Ripper right now, there's about three sentences about this new DNA discovery of Jack the Ripper. And they're basically playing it down, saying, well, one place is reporting this, but the sites that are reporting it aren't good sites. There's probably nothing in this. It might be a sensational. So it's in the article. You can read that. And then you can go click on the citation, read the citation that they're quoting from. And the same thing happened with, it just right out of the top of my head right now. Oh, DB Cooper, the DB Cooper thing. There was a man on the internet who has just gotten the media's attention. He says he knows how parachutes were folded and how the guy was actually this man named such and such, and he's got it all figured out, and he's gone into somebody's barn and found a parachute that was almost exactly like the parachute that the DB Cooper had, and on and on and on. And if you watch the clips on YouTube, it looks really good. You're looking at that, wow, this looks amazing. But then you look at the Wikipedia page and it says, you see more critical articles coming out about it, and you remember to yourself, wait a second, how come no other news sources are picking this up? How come the actual experts on this are not picking this up? And why is this man who suddenly has all this information, who sounds like he's so credible, when we look into his background, he's just kind of a conspiracy theorist who's been writing books on these topics, and there's no substance to it. It's like sensationalism. And let me just add in one more thing that I'm thinking of, because I see my friend Karen back here. We were talking about a show that had come out on the Zodiac Killer. And I watched the show on whatever streaming platform it was. It was a documentary about some guy, they think he was the Zodiac Killer. Dang, if it didn't look good. I was convinced by the time I finished watching it that this was the guy. I mean, it was pretty evident. But then you start thinking about it, what is missing from this? And you start realizing there's a lot missing. And it's a documentary. They're trying to sell it to us. It's making money. And their agenda is the same as the media. They're trying to get clicks.
We've got some hands up. We call on Michael.
Yeah, thank you very much for this presentation. And I'd like to see more sobering analysis like this. Because it's not a secret that we live in the age of mass paranoia, which is accelerated and exacerbated by the social media. So now all these rumors are spread much faster than before. And the only counter influence or remedy for this that I see, I agree with you about Wikipedia, by the way, but there is this fact checkings that sometimes they provide the evidence that no, this is not true. And sometimes people are saying, okay, why this mainstream media or corporate media is not reporting about something? Could it be because this media is more strict and not in such a rush to report anything until it's better confirmed? So it's basically two questions. One question is, what do you see the role of fact-checking in countering this paranoia? And another is, do you consider the position of mainstream media more reliable or less reliable when things like this emerge? So that's two questions. Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry, we're laughing because the transcription said some words that you said that you didn't say that were quite hilarious. Something about a chicken. Sorry, so we're laughing because of the. Okay, never mind. So
it's because of my accent, probably. So
no, it's just could be anything. AI isn't there yet. Our AI overlords aren't here yet quite. So the role of fact checking, gosh, we got to do this. We got to take this seriously. I don't know. I feel like I'm screaming into the wind some days, but I don't know if we just didn't think that it was possible we'd come to a day where people didn't believe expertise and they would think that because they could Google it, that they're somehow experts on a topic. And then anything like a Wikipedia, which has its pluses and minuses, that they would degrade it. It's probably the best we have at the moment. But you have to, I guess, keep going back to what is the goal of the agency that's giving you this information? Are they making money off it? Is it sensational? Do the headlines match the text of the article? Because a lot of times the headlines aren't written by the reporter. So I really don't have a great answer, except that we just need to be diligent. Check your windshield.
Okay, Sam.
Yeah, it was a very interesting story, but something was missing, namely who did it. You know, I was listening to it and it was taking place in 1954. So my first thought was obviously the communists. It was the fifth column, Alger Hiss, Joseph Stalin, well, in the grave by then, orchestrated this event, right? If it wasn't him, it was the homosexuals because they were, of course, blackmailable by the Soviets. Who would be outed if they didn't cooperate with the communists. And J. Edgar Hoover thought so because he knew a thing or two about homosexuals. And finally, if it wasn't the homosexuals, it was clearly the blacks, right? And you're missing this entire storyline. And of course, I'm being completely ironic, but what I'm trying to say is good stories like this always have culprits. I mean, imagine Pizzagate without Hillary Clinton. It just loses steam immediately. So who did it?
So nobody did it.
Being cynical. What was the societal perception?
Right. So there's always a villain, and you're exactly right. So they're making it out to be young men who I guess have unemployed young men that are the villains in this story. And you wonder about it. There could have been some real serious damage to people who we don't even know. Somebody could have been messed up a little bit. I think they use that phrase. There could have been a lot of things that happened. And if a person who had been an outsider, a black man, a gay man, a communist, a person of a different religion, a different color, a different look, that happened to have something that looked like a slingshot or a BB gun in their car, that could have been some serious things that had happened to them. So I mean, it's got serious repercussions to it.
Sure.
So
but I'm disappointed that at the lack of imagination of those people. I mean, I would pin it on the communists. I mean, I would really spin it out of, put it into high gear. Hoodlums just seems very too plain, and especially in the 50s. I mean, there were communists everywhere and UFOs. So, disappointing.
I don't know, maybe you never know where these stories are going to go. So I think that
Yeah.
whoever plans, I don't think anything was planned. I think these become organic, and like with Pizzagate, who would ever thought that would have been a thing? But it just kind of goes and then it goes and it goes. You never know who you're talking to. But no, it's a good question. I like your statement. Thank you.
Jerry or Dana?
Yeah, Zam, you could have tried another couple other things. Like that was during the, I think that was during the McCarthy period, so maybe that had something to do with it. Or,
Well, I
I
said
think,
communist, but do you think McCarthy did it as a plant to
right,
justify? Oh, good, good. I like it. I like it.
okay, or the North Koreans, because the Korean War was going around that time. Okay, what I wanted to know, did the news finally come up with a plausible explanation, or did they just stop reporting on it without giving any answers for both those cases, the pitting and for the drones?
Well, the drones, nothing's really been definitive. I think the new administration has been trying to release video. I think what is the press secretary that meets at the White House? Is that who it is? Has been saying, looks like it was just drones that were legally able to be there and so on. So they're trying to make it like it's no big deal. And there's been a lot of people in the skeptic community who have been doing talks about this, writing articles about it, and so on. But if you follow UFO Twitter, which is something I follow, they are the people who are true believers just think it's part of the cover up, and that any day now the truth will be revealed, and the government has been covering it up, and aliens are here, and any day now it's going to happen. They've been saying that for years. So no, there has been no follow-up. And the windshield pitting, I don't believe there was any follow-up, because it doesn't make, we're on to the next hysteria, I guess. So it's not going to sell papers to talk about some kind of conclusion.
Yeah, I could explain it to you, but it would bore you. So we will. I was thinking another phenomenon is when a couple catastrophes occur close to each other, and then it becomes a trend. We had two major air crashes, and then actually a third one in Canada.
Alaska too. Did they
Alaska,
have that
yeah,
when they
had
found
that.
in Alaska?
I meant Alaska, yeah. And then I heard reports of a collision between two planes on a runway while they were being towed to. And I thought that's probably not something that would have made the headlines unless it happened in San Jose Airport. Then it would be on the
Right. It must be the commies.
I have a problem with people sneaking into my house and hiding my cell phone and my glasses.
And my keys.
And I've never caught them, but
And where is my glasses? Why do they hide my glasses? Yeah, I get it. I don't understand, but we tend to, I don't know, it's easier to blame somebody else than to blame us for our failing memory or for our hair loss or our headaches. It's not that I've been staring at a computer screen for a long period of time. It must be because microwave weapons are coming in and they're zapping me, not anybody else in the household, and with weapons that do not exist. I mean, the Russians are either laughing hysterically at these stories, or they're saying, hey, maybe the Americans do, somebody does have something. I wonder if the Chinese do. I mean, isn't that what happened with the men who stare at goats, that with the ESP? The Russians thought that we were doing something, and we thought the Russians were doing something. So we all started analyzing remote viewing, and just became a big cycle.
yeah, they've hidden the results of that. I haven't heard anything about it.
Yeah, I know.
Excuse me, Zen?
Yeah. On a more serious note, I think conspiracy theories, good ones, have the property of not being falsifiable, right? You cannot prove that they don't exist because that's logically impossible, which is why they are so good. Occasionally people make mistakes, like the Pizzagate conspiracy was falsifiable because the proponents claimed that the pedophile ring was run in the basement of a pizzeria. The building in question had no basement. So the guy who constructed it wasn't being careful enough again. You have to, be very, very careful that your storyline isn't falsifiable. And but once it isn't, it's actually it's actually tricky. I mean, how do you convince something that something is not true? You could say that reasonably it doesn't seem likely or plausible that it's not true, but you cannot say that definitely that it isn't. So, yeah, what is your take on that? Sort of, as a skeptic, how do you counter something that's not falsifiable?
Well, have you been following the final experiment? Everybody following the final experiment happened in December. That's the flat earth community, which does exist. These people are quite good at talking science babble. And they believe that there's no way there could be a flat earth if the sun is in the sky 24 hours in Antarctica. So a group of people managed to fund some of the most prominent flat earther YouTubers to go to the Antarctic. And they spent a couple days and they brought every camera you can imagine and they filmed a 24-hour sun and the sky. And they performed experiments and they did outrageous things. You can find this all over YouTube. It's called The Final Experiment. It's been about 6 weeks. And they also brought people who were scientists there. So what ended up happening is the people who went realized that that the earth can't be flat because the sun is in the sky 24 hours. So they're having cognitive dissonance about it. So the people who are here who didn't go to the Antarctic are either losing their minds because they can't figure out how there could be a 24-hour sun and still have flat earth, or they believe they're all shams and shills and that it was green screens and all sorts of nonsense. So even though the people who went to the Antarctic thought of everything they could possibly think of to prove that they were really standing in snow, to people who really want to believe, there's just too many questions, and it was probably green screen or the government's hiding something and they didn't really go. They bought the people off. It's quite fascinating how badly they'll believe this. I mean, even with Pizzagate, there's people out there who probably think that there's a basement there somewhere. It's just a hidden door and they couldn't find it.
Well, that's true.
I,
Could I
I
ask
keep
you a
saying
quick
it's
follow-up?
in the
I always
basement
thought that the flat earthers were sort of a sarcastic group, that they didn't really
No.
believe it, but it was something, let's pretend that the earth is flat and we're going to hang out and drink beer. But you're saying that's for real to them.
This is a modern phenomena that really believes
They really believe,
that the
okay.
earth is flat. And it's all tied to, a lot of it's tied to religion. They believe that the Bible says in Genesis the earth is flat, so therefore the Bible cannot be true. I mean, cannot be a lie. So therefore it is true. So there's a lot of creationism stuff, the young earth creationism. There's a lot of religion in this. And I didn't realize that until recently. It's quite massive. Yeah. So they really do believe it.
I've got two people with their hands up. Let me take Sandra first.
Did you say Sandra?
Yes.
Oh, I want to go back to the pitted windshields in Bellingham. It does seem to me that might have been the start of the prison industrial complex, that they blamed these young men in groups, gangs. So I think that leads directly today to almost every report you hear from any police department about how prevalent gangs are. And of course, that's why we have to put people in jail, especially males. And then even in jail, of course, they're going to divide into gangs. So and then even internationally, Trump's been talking about the criminal element and the cartels. So it's all back to this gang mentality that we are afraid of groups of men gathering together, because of course that threatens the police department. It threatens the whole political system. So we've got to have a boogeyman. And unfortunately, young males are often the butt of that.
It could be the Haitians in Springfield, Ohio. Anytime
Yeah.
that they can create a us versus them mentality, it divides us. And when we're divided, then we're not able to fight together and see that we have a lot more in common than we have against each other. So yeah, so in this case, in the windshield pitting, it seems to have been young men who had too much time on their hands, But it could easily have been some other group, some other minority group without power, and they could have been the target. And I'm just surprised it didn't get that far. I don't know why, but it didn't.
Yeah, but it's okay if we have Ku Klux Klan and we have these Proud Boys and the militias groups. Those boys together are fine.
Well, not in some cases. I'm not okay with it.
Liz, you had your hand up before?
Sure. One thing, oh dear, let me get, okay, here we go. Very often you find what you're looking for. For example, after there was a minor South Korean nuclear leak, they found 10 times as much thyroid cancer. Well, what they found were harmless, indolent tumors that no one looked for before. And now they're doing much more checking, so they find more of it. And seemingly here, they didn't think of all the possibilities, gravel roads and trucks. If you want a conspiracy theory, maybe it was planted by big manufacturers of windshields. They were trying to create demand. One problem today is we have on the internet, we've handed every moron a megaphone.
Well, that's true, but
And it
you
takes
can't drown them out.
it takes 10 times the effort to fact check an irresponsible claim as it is to make it. I think we need to set standards for being listened to. And it's like Christopher Hitchens said, big claims need big evidence. If you don't have it, then I could ignore it. And we need to set that standard on the internet by just enforcing, just saying, come back when you've got a couple reliable sources here and read them to me. Tell me where they actually make your claim so that I can check it, rather than just assuming just because you can voice the words, I have to actually not laugh at your claim.
Right. And I think it's important that we have calm, reasonable discussions with people we love and people who we'd like to associate with. I think that making fun of people and ridiculing people like the flat earthers is part of the reason why we have so much misinformation, because they became their own little tribe and their own little echo chamber. And then what ends up happening is they become anti-vaccine. And then when we had the pandemic, they became disinformation, didn't trust anybody. I think if we're more accepting and we're calm and we give pushback, but in a reasonable, calm way, and try to find commonality with people, I think we'll get a lot farther. But there's probably less of us, and there's far more people out there who are sensationalizing it.
Okay, Senna.
Yeah, be respectful.
Well, two things occur to me. One is surely the windshields have got pitted with probably from pebbles thrown out in the road. And then the other thing that occurs to me is that everything that Trump and his minions believe is an example of untrue things, and he's persuaded them of all of them, which is pretty scary. Obviously, I guess we know that. When you can fire the generals, what does that do to our protection by the army?
Well, if you overwhelm people like us, critical thinkers, then we just can't function. There's too much. So, it's like a fire hose of misinformation coming to us right now. So I don't know what we can do about it except try to stay calm, try to pick one thing at a time, and to have good conversations and make good relationships with people. I don't have an answer.
Okay, Jerry.
Yeah. Basically, people are resistant to changing their mind about things. It used to be that the Earth was the center of the universe, and then somebody came up with the idea, well, maybe the sun is the center, and it took a long time for people to decide maybe the sun is the center. Although, when you come down to it, what's the center kind of depends upon what's useful. For a lot of purposes, Earth being the center works, and for other purposes, the sun being the center. I mean, if you want to do planetary orbits, it's better to make the sun center. But if you want to, sail a ship around the world, you're better doing the Earth. And there are things like the continental drift. There was a time that if you were a scientist and you argued for continental drift, you couldn't get a job. But then 30 years later, it was the other way around. If you didn't believe in continental drift, you couldn't get a job.
We
I'm
just
done.
have to have respect for change. I think that if you put people in tribes, we force them into tribes where then I think what will happen is they're only listening to each other and the conversation ends. And on the car ride up today, we were talking about just vaguely Jehovah Witnesses. And I remember people talking about how they would ridicule them when they come to your door, and they'd make fun of them, and they'd show up naked at the door, or they'd say offensive things to them. And what happens is the Jehovah Witnesses or any other group like that, they go back and they say, see, you were right. We are separate from them. They won't listen to us. They're wrong, and they're different from us, and they're they. Instead of learning that we can work with each other and try to find commonalities and see where we do exist together. And I think that that's a problem that we provide this culture. I don't know if it's social media, just magnifies it or what, but we are definitely turning into tribalism. And I think it's dangerous. And I think it's pervasive and it's all over, and we're just not even aware of it. Even differentiating ourselves into boomers versus Gen X and Gen Z and Y and whoever else numbers there are. I think even that might be dangerous. And I'm starting to hear people talking about that it separates us and makes us like a horoscope. Everybody's the same that's a Gen X. Everybody's the same that's a boomer. And it makes us it strips away who we actually are. And I think that's dangerous. And we need to push back on all that whenever we see it happen. And I think it's healthy. But again, we're a small group of people compared to the mass of misinformation out there.
Misuma.
Yeah, I have two comments. Thank you for sharing your insight about that incident. I learned a lot today. Thank you. First question is that in the medical industry, we are doing a lot of disservice in terms of using the social media and making millions of monies through alternative healings procedures without any evidence, and people, for some reason, go after them and try out all these alternative healing stuff, and almost I feel is detrimental.
Yeah.
Do you have any comments on that? Because I have friends who are so much into it that they kind of deny any kind of medical procedures or anything like that. And even though there are strong evidence.
Right. Well, personal anecdotes are much more powerful than facts. So our relationships we have with people are probably more influential than what your doctor is actually saying. I think that if we have respectful conversations, and you need to push back, but push back with allowing them to save face. If you challenge somebody, I say they're going to just circle the cognitive dissonance wagons and they're not going to hear you. So if you can find commonality and you can say things like, that's really interesting. I never really thought about it. I wonder what the answer is. I wonder how we'll know to answer that question. Let me think about that. I wonder this. I wonder that. What do you think? And if you can have a more nuanced or a little bit longer conversation with them, then maybe you will come up with a solution together, and maybe they'll feel like they weren't just told how stupid they are, but they'll say, yeah, you're right. I had heard that before. And I'll give one quick anecdote is I had cancer in 2013, breast cancer. I was very public about it. But at work one day, I mentioned it to another customer. I don't know what I was thinking. And she said, oh, my neighbor, he swears by some kind of horse pill. And if you take this stuff, and she starts telling me this stuff, and I said, what? I said, I'm going to go with what my doctors say. I'm not going to use some weird stuff. And she says, well, he cured his cancer with this horse pill. And now that he has cancer again, he's talking about, he's going to take this pill again. And I said, wait a minute, slow down. What did you just say? His cancer's back. So he didn't cure it after all. And she just got this pause on her face like, oh, I didn't think of that. He's got the cancer again. Maybe it never went away, but it was like it dawned on her. And then it was enough to be able to, I didn't tell her she was stupid. I didn't tell her he was wrong. I just kind of said, wait a minute, that's something wrong with this. And you felt like she kind of got a realization. And so maybe that's the kind of things we need to have with people. It takes time. Again, there's not as many of us as there are of people out there trying to push this nonsense out there, but I think it's our only choice.
And the second question I have is that during the Bush administration, they talked about WMD, weapons of mass destruction. So there are targeted fear created. What will be your response in those circumstances? Thank you.
Dividing us again, us versus them. Those people over there, them people, they're so different from us. I think the more we learn about other cultures and learn about more people, I think we're going to have a better society. I think the internet, I tend to be a Pollyanna, and I think the internet is a good thing. And I think we're able to have relationships with people across the world. And you can call people up on Zoom for free and talk to somebody somewhere. We can read about their culture. We can learn about their culture. I think the more we visit other worlds, learn about other people, listen to how they say things, I think we're going to have a better world. So funding agencies where kids are able to go and live in other cultures, I think is a good thing. It would be great if every American citizen or every person, instead of having to take on take a class, a certain class, that actually they would spend time in a different culture and learn about those cultures. I think that's important.
Okay, I see a few more hands up, but we're running out of time.
I'm fine. So you can keep asking me questions as long as you need to ask me questions.
Okay, but we're gonna have to break shortly to get ready
Okay,
for lunch.
if you guys need to leave,
Sam,
that's on you.
I'll give you the last
I'll
word,
stay.
but we'll turn it over to Greg after that.
I'm easy to approach too. You
Yeah.
guys can get a hold of me on my email or Facebook or any of the socials. So if you guys ever do want to reach out to me with questions, or you have other things you want to bring up to me, please, you can talk to me about it. That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, so I have a brief comment and a brief question. So I'm really disappointed with the Haitian cat eating conspiracy. To me,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
obvious that the cats were eaten by J.D. Vance's extended family. They live in the hills. They're in out of raccoons and possum, and they had to come down to Springfield because they needed something to eat. And I don't know why the mainstream media is covering it up. But here's my serious question: that, like the pitting example you gave, I wouldn't say it has a kernel of truth, but it has a kernel of plausibility that starts it. So I come out, I look at my windshield, and I see pockmarks. Like you said, I do not understand where they come from. The glass company, only many weeks later, publishes reports saying, well, it's gravel and sand and everything else. And the other thing is, I mean, I don't know about you, I do not know how BB guns work and what kind of damage they do or do not inflict on my windshield. So there's again this sort of lack of falsifiability, right? You're assuming a causation and you can't prove it's not true. Like I talked to some lady on Zoom once who was pushing ivermectin, and she says, my mother lives in a retirement home and everybody else got COVID, but she didn't because she took ivermectin. And I believed her. I'm sure that was true. And how do you argue with that?
Yeah.
Where do you take the conversation? So
unless you wait until the actual evidence comes out. But yeah, it's all plausible. I mean, it starts out
Right.
with something plausible, and then as the media feeds it and the conspiracy theories flood the market, there's not much else you can do. Just pause as long as you can and just calmly say, let's wait until they catch up with the science and people who have some more knowledge of this can kind of come out with something more reasonable. Put a Google alert on it on your computer and say, let's revisit this in a couple weeks. But I have a feeling this is just sensationalism used to sell newspapers. But yeah, I mean, wind chills get pitted. It's better than hitting in your face. Wind chills exist for a reason. That's why the windshield is pitted. Because if things were not coming at you as you're going down the road, we wouldn't need wind chills. So yeah, they're going to get pitted.